Get his stuff out of the garage, Greg. Buyer's coming Saturday.
Vanessa Crawford yelled that into a phone at 11:47 p.m. on the front porch of my house, 3 weeks before I was scheduled to come home from a deployment in Romania. Behind her, her husband and a contractor were dragging my deployment trunks down my driveway in the rain, headed for a dumpster. The trunks held my late father's medals, my daughter's old artwork, and 7 years of property records. The brick rancher behind her was mine. The deployment she was exploiting was a NATO rotation. The foreclosure auction she was running through the HOA was, under federal law, void the moment she signed it. She didn't know I was about to come home early. She didn't know my JAG attorney. She didn't know about the 3 other deployed soldiers whose homes she had already stolen. By Monday, in a federal courtroom, her 6-year scam was going to collapse in 10 minutes flat. Comment below. Where are you watching from? My name is Daniel Reyes Kerrigan, but everybody who has known me for more than 10 minutes calls me Danny. I'm an Army Master Sergeant, 18Z, which is the senior NCO rank in Special Forces. I am 39 years old, 6 feet tall, 190 pounds, and I have been on a Green Beret team for 11 years. Before that, I did 4 years in regular Army infantry. Before that, I grew up on the wrong side of San Antonio with a Mexican mother who cleaned hotel rooms and a Scots-Irish father who drove a long-haul rig. I joined the Army at 18. I never looked back. I bought my house on Magnolia Trace in the spring of 2017, 6 months after my divorce was finalized. My ex-wife Marisol kept the apartment in Tampa. I kept my pension and my pickup. Our daughter Sophia, who was 4 at the time, went with her mother. She is 11 now. She visits me in North Carolina twice a year. She likes that the brick ranch has a screened porch, a sycamore in the front yard, and a hammock between the sycamore and the dogwood. Magnolia Trace is in a quiet planned community called Pinehurst Greens, 12 miles south of Fort Liberty in Cumberland County, North Carolina. 82 houses, a community pool, a small clubhouse with a basketball hoop. Maybe a third of the homeowners are active duty military. Another third are retired from Fort Liberty. The rest are civilians, mostly families that work in Fayetteville. I paid HOA dues every quarter on the 1st of the month. Automatic draft, $215. I never missed a payment. I never had a violation. The mailbox was approved. The shutters were approved. The American flag I hung from the porch on Memorial Day was photographed and posted on the community Facebook page in 2019 by an HOA board member who liked the way it looked at sunset. I deployed in September of last year for a 9-month rotation in eastern Romania. Special Forces Detachment, NATO support mission, the kind of deployment where you are too busy to call home most weeks. I had my next-door neighbor, a retired Marine named Earl Whitcomb, watch the house. I had my mail forwarded to a P.O. box at Fort Liberty's Mail Processing Center, which would then be scanned to my secure email twice a month. I had my HOA dues on automatic draft from a USAA account that had not bounced a single transaction since 2015. I had a deployed soldier's standard checklist completed and filed with the JAG office on base. I had also, for reasons I now understand were not coincidence, requested an updated HOA payment ledger from the Pinehurst Greens HOA Management Company in August. The ledger came back showing a 0 balance, paid through Q4. I saved the email. I forwarded a copy to Earl. I forwarded another copy to my own personal Gmail. Special Forces teaches you that every piece of paper is a potential exhibit, and every exhibit is a potential lifeline. Vanessa Crawford had been the HOA president for about 18 months when I deployed. I had met her exactly twice. The first time at a community potluck, where she introduced herself wearing a sundress and a smile that did not reach her eyes. The second time at a homeowner meeting where she pushed through a special assessment for clubhouse modernization that nobody outside her 3-person voting block had asked for. I voted against it. So did Earl. So did about 12 other people. We lost. Vanessa, in retrospect, had remembered who voted against her. She had also remembered which of those people were active duty military. She had a list. We were on it. And while I was eating MREs and sleeping 6 hours a night in eastern Romania, she was about to take the next name on her list. I will tell you exactly how I learned my house had been sold. The email forward came at 3:14. I was sitting in a plywood briefing tent at Mihail Kogalnichanu Air Base, eating cold instant coffee out of a metal canteen cup and reviewing rotation paperwork. My laptop was open on a folding table. The subject line was from my forwarding service. New mail, Juniper Properties LLC. I almost deleted it. I get junk in that account every week, but the words properties caught my eye, and I clicked. Most property sale. The PDF was a closing summary, 4 pages. The cover sheet read, Property, 1147 Magnolia Trace. Buyer, Juniper Properties LLC. Sale price, $189,000. Closing date, October 14th, 6 weeks earlier. Method of sale, foreclosure auction conducted by Pinehurst Greens HOA per association lien. I read it twice. Then I read it again. 6 weeks earlier, while I was running detachment training exercises in northern Romania, the Homeowners Association had apparently auctioned my house and transferred the deed to a limited liability company for unpaid dues that had been paid on automatic draft for the entire duration of my deployment on the same USAA account I had been using for 7 years. I closed my eyes. I exhaled. I let my training take over. Special Forces teaches you a lot of things, but the most useful thing it teaches you is what to do in the first 5 minutes after you have absorbed bad news. You do not panic. You do not call anybody. You document. You photograph. You preserve. You build a paper trail. And then, only then, you wake up the people you trust. I forwarded the email to my personal Gmail. I forwarded it to a JAG attorney named Captain Imani Coffee, who I had met 2 years prior at a unit family readiness briefing, and who had given me her business card with the words, "If anything ever happens to your house while you're downrange, call me first," written on the back. I forwarded it to my brother in Texas, who works in title insurance. I forwarded it to my command's deployment liaison. Then I downloaded the PDF, saved it to my secure cloud, and opened a new Word document. I typed, October 14th, foreclosure sale conducted on 1147 Magnolia Trace, Pinehurst Greens HOA. Buyer, Juniper Properties LLC. Notice, 0. Knowledge, 0. Authorization, 0. Then I started a timeline. Here's a thing every deployed service member in America needs to know, and I want to say this slowly because it has saved more military families than any single piece of legislation since the GI Bill. The Service Members Civil Relief Act, codified at 50 U.S.C. Section 3953, prohibits the foreclosure of a deployed service member's primary residence during the period of military service and for 1 year following service, except by court order. There is no exception for HOA dues. There is no exception for vendor liens. There is no exception for any private association action. The foreclosure must go through a federal court, and the service member must be given the opportunity to be heard. The takeaway is very simple. Any non-judicial foreclosure on a deployed soldier's home is automatically void. Not voidable. Void. The sale never legally happened. The deed never transferred. The buyer owns nothing. The seller committed federal fraud. Vanessa Crawford, sitting in her cul-de-sac in Cumberland County, did not know what the SCRA was, or she did know, and she had decided to gamble that I would not. That gamble was about to cost her everything. Captain Coffee called me back inside 2 hours. I was in my bunk by then, folded against the cold prefab wall, listening to the wind work over the airfield outside. Master Sergeant, tell me everything. I told her. The dues, the deployment, the forwarded email, the buyer, the closing date, the seller of record, the signature. There was a pause. Then she said, Danny, this is going to be the easiest case I have ever litigated, but I need you to do exactly what I say. Yes, ma'am. Don't contact the HOA. Don't contact the buyer. Don't contact anybody in your community. I want her to think the sale was clean for as long as possible. The longer she thinks she got away with it, the more rope she gives us. Roger that. Are you due back on rotation? 96 hours. Perfect. I am going to file an emergency motion. I am going to request your home of record be restored prior to your return. I am going to start subpoenaing the HOA management records the moment your boots hit Pope Field. Yes, ma'am. And Danny. Ma'am. Get a few hours of sleep. The next 11 days are going to be the most satisfying of your career. She hung up. I lay back on my cot. The wind picked up. I slept 4 hours. When I woke up, I had a folder. The flight back to Pope Army Airfield took 18 hours, including a refuel in Ramstein. Captain Coffee was waiting for me on the tarmac at 7:42 local time, 11 days after the email, holding a manila folder, a coffee, and the phone number of an FBI special agent in the Charlotte field office. She walked me to her sedan. We sat in the parking lot. I had not yet been home. I had not yet seen Earl. I had not yet talked to anyone in Pinehurst Greens. Vanessa Crawford has done this before. Define before. In the last 6 years, 3 other deployed military homeowners in Pinehurst Greens have lost their houses to HOA foreclosure auctions. All 3 sales went to LLCs that share an EIN registration date and a Florida-based registered agent. All 3 properties were resold within 90 days at a markup averaging $78,000. I let that sit. 3 other military families. 3 other military families. Where are they now? 2 are still on active duty. 1 was medically retired and lives outside Fayetteville. None of them know that the sale of their home was illegal. All 3 accepted the loss. They believed the foreclosure was final. The HOA management company sent them very polite letters, saying their dues were unpaid and the lien had been enforced. I felt something shift in my chest, the kind of shift that used to mean the next phase of an operation. Captain, we are going to get those families their houses back too. She smiled the way only military lawyers smile when they realize the case in front of them is bigger than the one they were hired to argue. I was hoping you'd say that. She handed me the folder. Inside were the names. Sergeant First Class Marcus Boudreau, 82nd Airborne, deployed to Iraq in 2019 when his house was sold. Captain Lena Ortega, Army Aviation, deployed to Kuwait in 2021. Staff Sergeant David Eubanks, Special Forces medic, deployed to Niger in 2022. All 3 of them had been Pinehurst Greens homeowners. All 3 of them had lost their homes during deployment. All 3, according to public records, had simply moved on. The shell companies that had purchased their homes were registered to a Pinehurst Greens HOA board treasurer named Gregory Crawford, Vanessa's husband. Gregory owned a small real estate brokerage called Crawford Property Group. Crawford Property Group had handled the resales of all 3 previously stolen houses and had collected commissions averaging $11,000 per transaction. The Crawfords had stolen approximately $1.5 million from active duty military families over 6 years. I closed the folder. I closed my eyes. I felt the engine of an old, familiar discipline come online. Here's a thing about military training that does not show up on any recruiting poster. When the world goes sideways, when the betrayal lands at your feet, your body knows the difference between a problem you can shoot and a problem you have to outthink. A trained soldier does not aim at the second kind of problem. He doesn't punch the wall. He doesn't curse. He files. He archives. He sequences. He prepares. I sat in Captain Coffee's car and prepared. By 1300, we had a written list of every action item for the next 72 hours. By 1500, Captain Coffee had filed an emergency motion with the United States District Court for the Eastern District of North Carolina, seeking a temporary restraining order against Juniper Properties LLC, the Pinehurst Greens HOA, Gregory Crawford, and Vanessa Crawford. By 1630, the Crawford's attorney had been served at his Fayetteville office. He had no idea what the SCRA was. Earl Whitcomb called me at 1714. Danny, where are you? Pope, just landed. Why aren't you home? I did not answer. He did not need an answer. He had been a Marine. He understood operational silence. You should know, he said. There is a young couple in your house, with a baby. They paid $194,000 for it 3 weeks ago. They are nice people, Danny. They have a stroller in your living room. I closed my eyes. Earl, would you knock on their door tomorrow morning at 9 o'clock and tell them I am coming over to talk? Yeah. Tell them I am not going to throw them out. Tell them I am going to help them." There was a long pause. Then Earl, the retired gunnery sergeant who had never once cried in front of me in 8 years, made a sound very close to one. "Roger that, Danny." "Roger that, Marine." The next morning at 9 o'clock, I walked up the front porch steps of 1147 Magnolia Trace. It had been my front porch for 7 years. The same red brick, the same cedar railing, the same wreath I had hung the morning before deployment because Sophia would visit that fall, and she liked the wreath. The wreath was still there, slightly faded, otherwise unchanged. Earl was waiting on the porch. So was a young woman holding a baby on her hip. She was 26, maybe 27. She wore a Wofford College hoodie and house slippers. She looked terrified. "Master Sergeant Reyes Kerrigan?" "Just Danny, ma'am." "I'm Hannah Lake. This is my son, Theo. My husband, Joe, is at work. We bought this house 3 weeks ago. We have a deed. We have a mortgage. We have title insurance. She stopped. Her eyes filled. I held up my hand, slow, the way you signal to a frightened animal. "Mrs. Lake, I am not throwing you out of this house. I am not asking you to leave today. I want you to understand something very clearly before we talk about anything else. You are an innocent buyer. You have done nothing wrong. The people who sold this house to you committed a federal crime. I am here to make sure you do not lose anything in the process of unraveling what they did." Hannah Lake started crying. The baby started crying. Earl, behind her, put a hand on her shoulder. "Come inside, Danny." I went inside. The house was the same. The kitchen smelled like coffee. The living room smelled like baby formula. Sophia's old purple stuffed elephant was sitting on top of a moving box in the corner. Hannah and Joe Lake had not unpacked it because the box was labeled Sophia. Hannah had been nervous about touching it. I sat at my own kitchen table, which the Lakes had not had time to replace. I told Hannah Lake what had happened. Slowly, plainly, the way I would have briefed a junior NCO on a complicated mission. I told her about the SCRA, about Gregory Crawford's shell company, about the 3 other military families, about Captain Coffee, about the federal court hearing scheduled for the following Monday. By the time I finished, Hannah was no longer crying. She was furious. The kind of furious that 26-year-old new mothers can summon when they finally realize they have been the unwitting tool of someone else's con. That woman, Vanessa Crawford, she told us this was a bank-foreclosed property. She told us it was a totally clean title. She had her husband's brokerage handle our paperwork. She offered to walk us through closing personally. She brought a casserole the day we moved in. She did all of that, I said, to remove every potential question you might have. Hannah Lake stared at the coffee mug in her hand. Then she stood up. She walked to a small, antique secretary desk in the corner, opened the drawer, and pulled out a manila folder. She set it on the table. "Master Sergeant, I am a paralegal. I work for a real estate attorney in Fayetteville. The day after we moved in, something felt wrong. I started saving every email Vanessa sent me. I started saving every voicemail. I have her offering to falsify a date on closing paperwork. I have her telling Joe to not call the original mortgage holder because she handled all of that. I have a text from Gregory Crawford that says, 'Don't worry about the deployed guy. He won't be back for 6 months.'" Earl whistled, low. "Mrs. Lake, would you be willing to bring that folder to court on Monday?" "Master Sergeant, I will bring it on a silver platter, with my husband, and with our title insurance attorney, and our notary." The baby gurgled. The coffee maker dripped. Vanessa Crawford had no idea what was about to happen. I stood up. I shook Hannah's hand. I walked out onto the porch with Earl. We stood for a moment, looking out at the cul-de-sac. "Danny, there's one more thing you need to know." "What?" "Vanessa Crawford has been bragging to half the cul-de-sac that she's about to make another sale." "Whose house?" Earl pointed at a small brick rancher 3 doors down. The kind of rancher with a single yellow ribbon tied to the mailbox. "Sergeant First Class Bobby Ng, 82nd Airborne, deployed to Korea last week." I felt the shift again. "Earl, come to court on Monday. I'll wear my service blues." Captain Imani Coffee was 36 years old, had a JD from Wake Forest, had been an Army JAG officer for 10 years, and had grown up in Goldsboro, North Carolina, the daughter of a Marine staff sergeant and a public school principal. She was 5'2". She wore her hair in a tight bun, and her uniform creased to the millimeter. She drank black coffee out of a Yeti tumbler with a chip on the rim. She was, by my professional assessment, the most dangerous lawyer in the Eastern District of North Carolina that month. We sat in her office on Fort Liberty for 4 hours that Friday, the day before the hearing. The walls were beige, the carpet was army green. There was a framed law school diploma above her desk, and a framed photograph of her husband, a Marine helicopter pilot named Caleb, holding a fishing rod. Captain Coffee had pulled the entire HOA management file in 72 hours. She had subpoenaed Crawford Property Group's transactions for the last 7 years. She had pulled the title histories of every house in Pinehurst Greens. She had a flowchart on her whiteboard that connected Vanessa Crawford to Gregory Crawford, to Juniper Properties LLC, to 2 other Florida shell companies named Cypress Holdings LLC and Live Oak Realty LLC, to 4 Pinehurst Greens homes that had been sold under fraudulent foreclosure conditions in the last 6 years. The 4th home, the one Earl had pointed out, belonged to Sergeant First Class Bobby Ing. Vanessa had begun the paperwork on Bobby's foreclosure 4 days earlier, while he was on a flight to Osan Air Base. "Captain, what is going to happen at this hearing on Monday?" She set down her coffee. She turned to face me square. "Master Sergeant, the SCRA is the cleanest weapon the federal government has ever issued to a military attorney. There is almost no defense. The sale is void as a matter of law. The buyer's title is void as a matter of law. The seller is liable for damages, attorney's fees, and statutory penalties. And because Mrs. Crawford has now committed the same act 4 times, the United States Attorney's Office is going to file federal wire fraud and bank fraud charges before close of business on Tuesday." "How long does the hearing take?" She actually laughed, a short, pleased laugh. "Danny, the hearing will take 10 minutes, maybe 12. The judge will read the SCRA aloud. He will void the sale. He will order the deed restored. He will enjoin Mrs. Crawford from any further HOA action against any military homeowner pending federal investigation. The clock starts when he gavels in. He will be done before he finishes his coffee." I looked at the flowchart again. I looked at the 4 families on the whiteboard. "Captain, one favor. I want all 4 families in the courtroom. I want Marcus Boudreaux. I want Lena Ortega. I want David Eubanks. I want Hannah Lake. I want Bobby Ing on a phone if we can get him." Captain Coffee nodded once, the way a junior officer nods when she already had the same plan. "Danny, I called all 4 of them this week. Boudreaux and Ortega flew in last night. Eubanks drove up from Spartanburg this morning. Bobby Ing is going to join by video link from his unit ops center in Korea." I looked at her for a long second. "Captain Coffee, you are very, very good at this." She picked up her coffee. She tipped it toward me. Quiet smile. "I know, Danny. Now go get some sleep." I did not sleep much that weekend. I spent Saturday morning at Marcus Boudreaux's hotel. He had flown in from Louisiana, where he had taken a logistics job after his medical retirement in 2022. He was 41, 2 kids. When the Pinehurst Greens HOA had taken his house in 2019, he had been deployed to Iraq, watching a man named Larry from his unit get medevaced for a leg wound. By the time he came home, his house was gone, his deed was in someone else's name, and his belongings were in a storage unit in Spring Lake. He had paid the storage unit fees out of pocket for 3.5 years before he could afford to retrieve them. He cried when I told him the sale had been void the whole time. I sat with him for 45 minutes. I let him talk. He told me about his daughter, who had refused to sleep in her bed in their new apartment for 6 months because she missed the carpet in her old bedroom. He told me his wife had filed for separation in 2021 because she could not handle the financial stress. They had reconciled in 2023. I held his shoulder for a moment when he stood up. "Master Sergeant, I'll be in court Monday. Wear your dress blues, Marcus." He nodded. Saturday afternoon, I drove out to a small farmhouse outside Spartanburg to meet David Eubanks. He had been a Special Forces medic. He had lost his Pinehurst Greens house in 2022 while deployed to Niger. He had not bought another house since. He had been renting a single-bedroom apartment above a feed store. He had not, he told me, been able to bring himself to enter the housing market again. We did not need to say much. Special Forces medics speak the same language, whether they are deployed or retired. His old Belgian Malinois, Falco, rested his head on my boot for 15 minutes. Danny, thank you for coming to get me. You'd have come for me, brother. Damn right I would. Sunday morning I drove to a townhome complex in Raleigh, where Captain Lena Ortega was now stationed at Pope Field's NCO Training Command. She had lost her Pinehurst Greens house in 2021 while deployed to Kuwait. She had taken the loss harder than the others because she had been pregnant with her second child at the time. The miscarriage that followed 3 weeks after the foreclosure notice was not, the doctors said, caused by stress alone, but she had carried that math with her ever since. She did not cry. She listened. She wrote notes on a yellow legal pad while I spoke. When I finished, she looked up at me and said, "Master Sergeant, I will be in that courtroom in dress greens, and I will be the calmest person in the room. I want to look that woman in the eye." "Yes, ma'am." Sunday afternoon, I drove back to Cumberland County. I stopped at Earl Whitcomb's house. We sat on his back porch. He had a sweet tea waiting. His old Marine Corps shadow box was on the wall behind us. "Danny, how does it feel?" I thought about it for a long time. "Earl, I have been on 3 combat deployments. I have seen things I will not talk about, but I have never, in my life, anticipated a Monday morning the way I am anticipating this one." He nodded. He sipped his tea. "Tomorrow, Marine, I get to watch a thief learn what a paper trail can do." That evening I called Sophia. She was at her mother's apartment in Tampa, eating pasta. She wanted to know when I was coming back. "Soon, mija." "How soon?" "Couple weeks." "Did your house get robbed, Daddy?" "Yeah, baby." "Did you get it back?" "Tomorrow." "Okay," she said, like the world made sense again. "Tell me when you do." I told her I loved her. She told me she loved me. I hung up. I slept 5 hours. When I woke up, I had a folder. Vanessa Crawford had no idea I was back in the country. That, in retrospect, was her last and largest mistake. Captain Coffey had filed the emergency motion under seal. She had requested expedited service on the Crawfords. The first time Vanessa learned that anything had gone wrong was when a process server in a sheriff's vest knocked on her front door at 17:50 Friday afternoon and handed her a 43-page packet of federal court paperwork. She read approximately 9 pages of it before she called her brother-in-law, the lawyer. The brother-in-law called her back at 18:45 with the words, "Vanessa, you need to listen to me very carefully right now." She did not listen carefully. She drove around the cul-de-sac at 1930 in her white Cadillac Escalade, slowly, scanning the houses. She rang Earl Whitcomb's doorbell. Earl, on instructions, did not answer. She rang Hannah Lake's doorbell. Hannah, on instructions, did not answer. She drove out to Bobby Ng's brick rancher with the yellow ribbon. Bobby was in Korea. At 2000, Vanessa Crawford did the smartest thing a guilty person can do. She went home and called her husband. Gregory did the dumbest thing a guilty person can do. He did not pick up. By 2030, Vanessa was attempting to draft, in her own handwriting, a rescission of foreclosure notice that she planned to file Monday morning to undo the sale before the hearing. The notice was not a real legal document. It was 4 lines of cursive on Pinehurst Green's HOA letterhead that read, "The October 14th sale of 1147 Magnolia Trace is hereby rescinded due to administrative error. All parties are returned to their previous status." She signed it with her fountain pen. She drove to her brother-in-law's office at 9 a.m. Saturday morning. He read the letter. He read it again. He set it down. He looked at her. "Vanessa, it does not work like that." "Why not?" "Because the sale was already final. Because the buyer has already taken possession. Because once you submit this letter, you are admitting in writing to administrative wrongdoing on a transaction that involved a deployed service member. Because the federal court is going to subpoena this letter within 48 hours. She stopped him. "I'll handle it, Brad." She drove home. She drank a bottle of Pinot Grigio that afternoon. I know all of this because Captain Coffey subpoenaed Brad Crawford's office records on Monday morning at 7:14, before the hearing. She also subpoenaed Vanessa's text messages. Vanessa had sent her sister, in Tampa, the following text message at 23:42 Saturday night. I don't think I can fix this one. Some special forces guy is back early and he's too smart. That text went into the federal evidence file. Sunday morning, Vanessa Crawford did the next dumbest thing. She drove to the property. She parked in front of 1147 Magnolia Trace. She got out of the Escalade in slippers and a robe and walked up the front porch. She rang Hannah Lake's doorbell. Hannah did not answer. So Vanessa knocked harder. She knocked 3 more times. She called out, "Hannah, sweetie, I just need to talk to you for a minute." Hannah's husband Joe came to the door. Joe Lake was a quiet man, 28 years old, worked at a Toyota dealership in Fayetteville. He stood in the doorway with his arms folded. "Mrs. Crawford, you need to leave my property." "Joe, sweetheart, I can fix this. There has been a misunderstanding. I just need—" "Mrs. Crawford, I am asking you politely. Please leave." He did not raise his voice. He simply held up his phone, screen out, the camera light on. She froze. She backed away. She got into her Escalade. She drove home. Joe Lake closed the door. He emailed the video clip to Captain Coffee within 4 minutes. Trespassing on a property tied to an ongoing federal proceeding. Witness tampering. Civil contempt. Vanessa Crawford did not sleep Sunday night. The doorbell camera at 1147 Magnolia Trace, which now belonged legally to me again under the federal motion, recorded her white Escalade slow rolling past my house 3 separate times between 2:14 and 4:02. Captain Coffee checked her phone at 6 a.m. Monday and found 17 new doorbell camera clips waiting for her. She forwarded all of them to the United States Attorney's Office. She drank her coffee. She drove to court. The Terry Sanford Federal Building in Raleigh is a 4-story limestone block on Fayetteville Street. The federal courtroom on the 2nd floor, the courtroom where the Honorable Marlon Westgate would preside that Monday morning, has 31 rows of dark walnut benches, 2 long counsel tables, and a flag of the United States standing 6 feet tall behind the judge's chair. I arrived at 8:14. I was in my Class A dress uniform, beret in my hand, Master Sergeant rank on my collar, Special Forces tab on my left shoulder, Bronze Star ribbon, 2 combat infantry badges, and a deployment salad 3 rows tall on my chest. Earl Whitcomb arrived at 8:18, Marine Corps Service Blues. He saved me a seat in the front row. Hannah Lake and Joe arrived at 8:24. They had a paralegal. They had 3 folders. They sat in the 2nd row. Marcus Boudreau arrived at 8:31, Class A dress uniform, 82nd Airborne patch. He nodded at me. He sat in the 3rd row. David Eubanks arrived at 8:39. He was in his old Special Forces dress greens. He had brought Falco the Belgian Malinois with him as an emotional support dog. Falco wore a USA flag bandana. The bailiff did not say a word. Captain Lena Ortega arrived at 8:47, dress greens, calm face. At 8:58, Sergeant First Class Bobby Ng's face appeared on the courtroom's video link screen, transmitted live from a unit ops center on Osan Air Base in South Korea. Behind Bobby, 2 of his platoon sergeants. Behind them, a Korean sunrise. The Crawfords arrived at 9:01. Vanessa Crawford was in a navy blazer and pearls. Her makeup had been applied with a heavy hand. Her brother-in-law Brad Crawford walked beside her, carrying a leather briefcase that did not, I noticed, contain very many papers. Behind them, Gregory Crawford in a wrinkled gray suit. He did not look at his wife. The 3 Crawfords sat at the defendant's table. Vanessa scanned the courtroom. She saw Earl. She saw Hannah and Joe. She saw the Boudreau family in the 3rd row. She saw David Eubanks in dress greens, with a war dog at his feet. She saw Captain Ortega in dress greens, with her hands folded in her lap. She saw Bobby Ng's face, 8,000 miles away, on a flat-screen television. She saw me last. I was in the front row, Class A, beret in hand. Her face went the color of a hospital bedsheet. She turned to her brother-in-law and whispered. He whispered back. Her left hand began to shake. Brad Crawford reached down and gently put a hand on her wrist to steady her. The bailiff called us all to rise. The Honorable Marlon Westgate entered the courtroom at 9:09. 64 years old, federal bench appointee since 2014. Vietnam veteran, black robe, gray hair, the kind of measured movement that cost him 50 years of practice to refine. He sat. We sat. He looked at the case caption. He looked at Captain Coffee at the plaintiff's table. He looked at Brad Crawford at the defendant's table. He looked at me. He looked at the row of dress uniforms behind me. He looked at Vanessa Crawford for 1 full second. Then he opened his bench book. Counsel, before we begin, I want to make something clear. I have read every page of the plaintiff's emergency motion. I have read every page of the supporting exhibits. I have read the SCRA. We will proceed promptly. Captain Coffee, you may proceed. Judge Marlon Westgate took 10 minutes to dismantle 6 years of fraud. 9:12. Captain Coffee, please read into the record the relevant text of 50 U.S.C. Section 3953. Captain Coffee read it. Slow. Clear. The law that prohibits non-judicial foreclosure of a deployed service member's primary residence. Word for word. The entire courtroom listened. Falco, the Belgian Malinois, listened. Bobby Ng on the screen from Korea listened. 9:14. Captain Coffee, do you have evidence that Master Sergeant Reyes Kerrigan was on active military duty on October 14th of last year? I do, Your Honor. Certified deployment order. The bailiff handed it to the judge. The judge read it, set it on his bench. 9:15. Do you have evidence that the Pinehurst Greens Homeowners Association conducted a non-judicial foreclosure sale of the plaintiff's primary residence on October 14th of last year? I do, Your Honor. Closing summary, deed transfer, auction notice. The bailiff handed them up. Read. Bench. 9:16. Do you have evidence that the defendants conducted similar non-judicial foreclosures against the primary residences of Sergeant First Class Boudreaux, Captain Ortega, and Staff Sergeant Eubanks during their respective periods of active duty deployment? I do, Your Honor. 3 additional bound packets. The bailiff handed them up. 9:18. Mr. Crawford, do your clients dispute any of the documentary evidence the plaintiff has produced? Brad Crawford stood. He cleared his throat. Your Honor, my clients. Mr. Crawford, the question is yes or no. A long pause. No, Your Honor, they do not. 9:19. Judge Westgate set down his pen. He looked at Vanessa Crawford. He let 3 full seconds pass. The kind of 3 seconds that, in a federal courtroom, feel like a long winter. Mrs. Crawford, you authorized 4 sales. Your Honor, Mrs. Crawford, you authorized 4 sales. She stopped. She nodded. Her chin began to tremble. Yes, Your Honor. All 4 sales involved active-duty military service members. Yes, Your Honor. None of those 4 sales were authorized by a federal court. No, Your Honor. None of those 4 service members received notice prior to those sales. No, Your Honor. All 4 sales are void. A pause. Yes, Your Honor. 9:21. The judge picked up his pen. He wrote for 35 seconds. He set the pen down. The court rules as follows. The non-judicial foreclosure sales of properties at 1,147 Magnolia Trace, 312 Persimmon Court, 488 Cypress Bend, and 215 Sweet Gum Lane in Pinehurst Greens, Cumberland County, North Carolina, conducted by the Pinehurst Greens Homeowners Association during the active duty deployments of the named service members, are void as a matter of federal law. The court orders the immediate restoration of all 4 deeds. The court orders the Pinehurst Greens HOA to cease all foreclosure activity against any military homeowner in good standing, pending resolution of the federal investigation. The court further orders the disgorgement of all proceeds from the resale of these 4 properties, said proceeds to be paid into the registry of the court within 7 days for distribution to the lawful owners. The defendants are enjoined from any further service in any capacity related to a homeowners association in the state of North Carolina, pending criminal investigation. He looked at Vanessa Crawford. Mrs. Crawford, the Assistant United States Attorney for the Eastern District of North Carolina, is in the back of this courtroom. He has indicated to the court that federal wire fraud and bank fraud charges will be filed against you and your husband within 48 hours. I would suggest you find a criminal attorney before lunch." He paused. This proceeding is adjourned. 9:22. The gavel cracked. Marcus Boudreau made a sound behind me, a small, surprised sound, the sound of a man who has just been told, in plain English, that his house is his again. Hannah Lake reached across the bench and gripped Joe's hands so tight his knuckles went white. David Eubanks bent down and rested his forehead against the top of Falco's head. Captain Ortega closed her eyes for exactly 2 seconds. Then she opened them, stood, and saluted the bench. On the video screen from Osan, Bobby Ng smiled the broadest smile I have ever seen on a soldier's face. Vanessa Crawford did not move. She sat at the defendant's table with her hands flat on the wood, looking at the seal of the United States behind the empty judge's chair. 10 minutes flat. Hannah Lake and her husband Joe did not lose anything in the unwinding. The Lake's title insurance policy, plus a court-ordered restitution payment from the Crawfords, plus a small fund put together by the 4 military families involved, covered every dollar Hannah and Joe had paid. They moved into a smaller rancher in the same neighborhood within 6 weeks. Hannah quit her paralegal job and started a small consulting practice, helping innocent buyers caught in fraudulent flips understand their rights. I moved back into 1147 Magnolia Trace on a Saturday in late November. Earl came over with a casserole his wife had made. We ate on the screened porch. The wreath was still on the door. The hammock was still strung between the sycamore and the dogwood. Sophia's purple stuffed elephant was in a clean storage box in the closet, exactly the way Hannah Lake had left it. The federal indictment came down on Thursday. Vanessa and Gregory Crawford, together, faced 11 counts of wire fraud, 6 counts of bank fraud, 4 violations of the SCRA criminal provisions, and 1 count of conspiracy. Brad Crawford negotiated. The Crawfords pleaded out in April. Vanessa got 9 years federal. Gregory got 7. Marcus Boudreau's wife flew up from Louisiana to walk through their old house with him in February. They cried in the kitchen. They did not move back. They sold the restored property to a young Air Force family the following spring and bought a new house in Louisiana with the proceeds, plus the federal restitution. Marcus told me at his retirement ceremony in May that for the first time since 2019, his daughter was sleeping through the night. Captain Lena Ortega and her husband moved back into 312 Persimmon Court in March. Her son was born in July. They named him Marcus, after Marcus Boudreau. Staff Sergeant David Eubanks moved back into 488 Cypress Bend in February. Falco, the Belgian Malinois, moved with him. David started a quiet, small business teaching wilderness medicine to local scouts. Sergeant First Class Bobby Ng came home from Korea in March, walked into 215 Sweet Gum Lane, and found Earl Whitcomb sitting on the front porch with 2 cold beers and a yellow ribbon untied and folded on the doormat. They drank both beers in silence. Then they shook hands. In May, I started something I had been thinking about for a long time. The Reyes Kerrigan Service Member Property Defense Fund, a small foundation that does one specific thing. It provides free legal representation to active duty military and reservists whose homes are threatened by HOA foreclosure, predatory lien practice, or any other action that would otherwise be voided under the Service Members Civil Relief Act. The intake line runs out of a small office in Fayetteville. Captain Imani Coffey is on the board. So is Hannah Lake. So is Earl Whitcomb. So is Marcus Boudreau. So is David Eubanks. So is Captain Lena Ortega. So is Sergeant First Class Bobby Ng. So is my daughter Sophia, who is now 12, and who insisted, when I told her about the fund, that she be a junior advisor. Her job, she informed me, would be to send a handwritten letter to every kid whose parent had been helped by the fund, telling them that their parent's house was safe and that nobody could take it away. She designed the stationery herself. It has a sycamore tree on it. The Crawfords' Cadillac Escalade got auctioned at a federal forfeiture sale in September. The proceeds went to the 4 military families. Pinehurst Greens elected a new HOA board in February. Earl Whitcomb is the new president. He has not raised dues. He has not authorized any non-judicial foreclosures. He has approved 23 American flags hung from 23 porches on Memorial Day. The cul-de-sac is quieter now. The flags catch the light at sunset. The Reyes-Kerrigans keep going. So do the Boudreaux. So do the Ortegas. So do the Eubanks. So do the Nings. So do the Lakes. So does any community that decides petty power is not the price of belonging. That's how it's always been.